Welcome to the channel Error Coins Hub, and today we're diving into something that might just change the way you look at your spare change forever. Because what if I told you that a simple penny from 1972, a coin that millions of people probably threw into jars, spent at stores, or simply overlooked, could actually be worth a staggering $13 million? Yes, you heard that right, $13 million for a 1-cent coin. Now, I know what you're thinking. How is that even possible? How can something so common, so ordinary, something that was minted by the millions, suddenly become one of the most valuable coins in the entire numismatic world? And that's exactly what we're going to uncover today. So buckle up, because the story is going to take you on a journey through minting errors, historical significance, incredible auction records, and the kind of treasure hunt that happens right in your own pocket. The 1972 1-cent coin, specifically the ones with the Doubled Die Obverse error, has become the stuff of legends among coin collectors. And when one of these beauties showed up at a major auction, the bidding war was absolutely insane, with collectors from around the world fighting tooth and nail to own a piece of American minting history. And when the gavel finally came down, the final price was a jaw-dropping $13 million. Making it one of the most expensive pennies ever sold in human history. But before we get too deep into why this particular coin commands such an astronomical price, let me tell you something that's going to keep you on the edge of your seat. This 1972 penny isn't the only treasure we're talking about today, because coming up after this, we have a 1977 1 cent that's valued at millions, and then a 1982 D 1 cent that'll blow your mind even further. So make sure you stick around until the very end, because you absolutely do not want to miss what's coming. Trust me, each coin has a story that gets more incredible than the last. Now, let's get back to our 1972 superstar penny and really understand what makes it so special, so valuable, and why collectors are willing to pay the price of a luxury mansion for a single 1-cent coin. The year 1972 was a fascinating time in American history. The Vietnam War was winding down, Richard Nixon was in the White House, and the United States Mint was churning out billions of coins to keep up with the demands of a growing economy. And among those billions of Lincoln cents produced that year, something went terribly, beautifully wrong at the Philadelphia Mint. You see, the process of creating a coin involves multiple steps, and one of the most critical steps is the creation of the die, which is essentially the stamp that imprints the design onto the blank metal disc that becomes your coin. And in 1972, during the production of the Lincoln cent dies, something extraordinary happened. The hub, which is used to create the working die, was impressed onto the die multiple times. But here's the kicker: it wasn't aligned properly the second time. This misalignment created what's known as a doubled die error. And when you look at these coins under magnification, or even sometimes with the naked eye, you can see a clear doubling of the letters, the date, and even Lincoln's profile, particularly noticeable on the words Liberty and In God We Trust, where the letters appear to have a shadow or echo effect, almost like they're vibrating or have been stamped twice, which is exactly what happened. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's a cool error, but why $13 million? And that's where the story gets even more interesting, because it's not just about the error itself. It's about the rarity of these error coins and the incredible condition in which they've survived. Most 1972 double die pennies that made it into circulation got worn down, scratched, damaged, or simply lost to time, dropped into fountains, melted down, or buried in landfills. But the ones that survived in pristine condition, graded MS67 or higher by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, are so incredibly rare that they're practically unicorns in the coin collecting world. And when a coin is that rare and that historically significant, collectors go absolutely wild. The auction record for the finest known example of the 1972 Doubled Die Obverse Penny is truly legendary. And the coin that sold for $13 million was a specimen that had been preserved in almost perfect condition, locked away in a collection for decades, never circulated, never touched by greasy fingers, maintained in a climate-controlled environment, and when it finally came to market, It was like the numismatic equivalent of finding a T-Rex fossil in your backyard. Everyone wanted it, and the price reflected that insane demand. But here's something that makes this even more exciting for you watching right now. Not every 1972 Doubled Die penny is worth $13 million. In fact, depending on the grade and condition, these coins can range anywhere from a few $1,000s for a heavily worn example to hundreds of thousands for a nice uncirculated piece. And that means there's a real possibility, a genuine chance, that you could have one of these hiding in an old coin collection in your grandmother's jewelry box, in that jar of pennies you've been meaning to sort through, or even in your pocket change if you're incredibly lucky. The key is knowing what to look for. And that's where education becomes your greatest tool in this treasure hunt. When examining a 1972 penny for the double die error, you want to focus on the obverse side of the coin. That's the side with Lincoln's profile, and specifically, you want to look very carefully at the inscriptions. Grab a magnifying glass or a jeweler's loupe with at least 10x magnification, and examine the word Liberty, which appears above Lincoln's head, because on a genuine 1972 Doubled Die Obverse Penny, you'll see a very distinct doubling of the letters, especially noticeable on the letters L, I, B, E, R, T, and Y, where it looks like there's a second impression slightly offset from the first, creating that ghostly shadow effect I mentioned earlier. The same doubling can be seen on In God We Trust. The motto that curves along the top of the coin, and even the date 1972 itself shows doubling, particularly on the numbers, and once you know what to look for, it becomes unmistakable. It's like one of those magic eye pictures where once you see it, you can't unsee it, and suddenly you're inspecting every single 1972 penny that crosses your path. Now, let's talk about the historical context that makes this coin even more significant, because 1972 wasn't just any year for American coinage. It was a transitional period where the mint was dealing with composition changes, production challenges, and quality control issues that led to several notable errors and varieties across different denominations. The Philadelphia Mint, which produced the double die pennies we're discussing, has a long history dating back to 1792, and it's produced some of the most iconic and valuable error coins in American numismatic history, from the famous 1955 double die Lincoln cent to modern errors that still slip through quality control today. And the 1972 double die falls right into this tradition of spectacular minting mistakes that become extraordinary treasures. What's particularly fascinating about the 1972 double die penny is that it represents a specific type of error that can't be replicated or faked easily, because the doubling occurs at the die stage before any coins are actually struck, which means every coin struck from that defective die carries the exact same doubling pattern. And this consistency is what allows experts to authenticate genuine examples versus counterfeits or coins that have been mechanically doubled through post-mint damage, which is a completely different thing and worth essentially nothing. The authentication process for high-value coins like the $13 million 1972 penny is incredibly rigorous, involving examination by multiple experts, analysis under high-powered microscopes, comparison with reference specimens, and certification by professional grading services that guarantee authenticity and grade, and this certification is absolutely crucial, because it provides buyers with confidence that they're purchasing a genuine article and not a cleverly disguised fake. Speaking of authentication and grading, let's talk about what that $13 million coin looked like and why its condition commanded such an extraordinary premium. Because in the coin collecting world, condition is everything. The grading scale for coins runs from 1 to 70, with 70 being absolute perfection. A coin that looks like it just came from the mint 5 minutes ago, without a single mark, scratch, or imperfection visible even under magnification. And the $13 million 1972 double die penny was graded MS67 red, which means it was in mint state, never circulated, with fully original red copper color preserved, and only 3 tiny imperfections that prevented it from being graded even higher. At MS67, this coin exhibited what collectors call flashy luster, which is that bright, reflective quality that makes the surface dance with light, and the doubling was strong and clear, visible even without magnification, which is what collectors call good eye appeal. And in the world of rare coins, eye appeal can add tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars to a coin's value because people aren't just buying an investment, they're buying a work of art, a piece of history, something beautiful to look at and admire. Now, you might be wondering, are there other 1972 pennies that are valuable besides the famous Doubled Die variety? And the answer is yes, absolutely, because while the Doubled Die Obverse is the superstar of the 1972 Lincoln Cent lineup, there are other varieties and errors from that year that are worth looking for. For example, some 1972 pennies were struck on planchets intended for other denominations, creating what's called a wrong planchet error, and these can be worth thousands of dollars depending on what they were struck on. There are also off-center strikes, where the coin wasn't properly centered on the die when it was struck, resulting in part of the design being missing and part of the blank planchet showing. And depending on how dramatic the off-center strike is, these can range from a few dollars to several hundred or even thousands for extreme examples. Additionally, there are die cracks and die breaks on some 1972 pennies, which occur when the die itself develops cracks or chips during use, and these transfer to the coins as raised lines or blobs of metal. And while most die cracks aren't particularly valuable, some dramatic ones, especially retained cuds, where a piece of the die broke off creating a large blank area on the coin, can be worth $50 to $500 or more to error collectors who specialize in that sort of thing. But nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to the value and desirability of that 1972 Doubled Die Obverse variety, which stands alone as the king of 1972 pennies and one of the most valuable Lincoln cents ever produced. Let me share with you some real stories of people who have actually found these valuable 1972 pennies, because these aren't just theoretical treasures, they're real coins that have been discovered by ordinary people doing ordinary things, and these stories might just inspire you to start searching. There's the famous case of a man in Texas who inherited his grandfather's coin collection in the early 2000s, and among the thousands of coins in coffee cans and albums, he found 3 1972 pennies that looked a bit unusual. He wasn't even sure what he had, but something told him to have them checked out. So he took them to a local coin dealer who nearly fell out of his chair when he examined them under a loupe, because all 3 were genuine 1972 Doubled Die Obverse pennies. 2 of them were heavily circulated, graded about good to fine, and they sold for $2,500 and $3,800 respectively. But the third one was an extremely fine example that brought $47,000 at auction, completely changing this man's financial situation and allowing him to pay off his mortgage, all because his grandfather had randomly pulled some odd-looking pennies from circulation decades earlier and saved them without even knowing what they were. Then there's the story of a woman in Ohio who worked as a bank teller in the 1970s, and she had a hobby of checking the rolls of pennies that came through her station, looking for wheat cents and other collectibles. And one day in 1973, just a year after these double die pennies were made, she spotted something weird on a penny that came through in a customer's deposit. The letters looked blurry and doubled, and even though she didn't know exactly what she had, she knew it was something special, so she swapped it out with a penny from her own wallet and took it home. She held on to that coin for almost 40 years, and when she finally had it authenticated and graded in 2012, it came back as a 1972 Double Die Obverse, graded MS63 red, and she sold it at a heritage auction for $126,500, not quite $13 million, but certainly enough to retire comfortably and travel the world, all because she had a sharp eye and the wisdom to save something that looked different. These stories illustrate something really important about coin collecting and treasure hunting in general. You don't need to be an expert to find valuable coins. You just need to be observant, patient, and willing to learn. And in today's world with YouTube videos, online forums, price guides, and authentication services readily available, It's easier than ever to educate yourself about what to look for and how to identify potentially valuable coins. Now, I want to address something that might be on your mind. If these 1972 double die pennies are so valuable, why don't we hear about them being found more often? And the answer is actually pretty simple, because despite the millions of 1972 pennies produced, the number that actually have the double die error is extremely small. We're talking maybe a few hundred to a few thousand coins at most, and of those, most have been found and are already in collections, graded, and accounted for. But here's the exciting part. Numismatists estimate that there are still dozens, possibly even hundreds, of these double die pennies hiding out there in the world, tucked away in old collections, mixed into penny jars, sitting in bank vaults, or circulating in commerce, and every year a few more turn up, discovered by sharp-eyed collectors or lucky individuals who just happen to look at their change a little more carefully that day. And that could be you. Remember, we're still talking about the first coin in today's video, and I haven't even told you about the 1977 1 cent worth $8 million or the 1982 D 1 cent worth $3 million that are coming up next. And trust me, those stories are going to be just as mind-blowing, with their own unique errors, auction records, and treasure hunt possibilities. So definitely stick around, because you're going to want to hear about every single one of these incredible coins. Before we move on, let me give you some practical tips for starting your own search for valuable 1972 pennies and other rare coins. Because knowledge is power, and the more you know, the better your chances of striking it rich. First, start by going through any old coin collections you or your family members might have. Check those jars of pennies, old wallets, dresser drawers, anywhere coins might have accumulated over the years. And when you're examining 1972 pennies, use good lighting and magnification. A simple magnifying glass will work, but a jeweler's loupe with 10x magnification is even better and costs only about $10 to $20 online. Second, familiarize yourself with what the doubling should look like by searching online for images of authenticated 1972 doubled die obverse pennies. There are excellent resources on PCGS and NGC websites, as well as error coin forums, where you can see high-resolution photos and compare them to your own coins. Third, don't get discouraged if you don't find one immediately, because remember, these are rare. That's what makes them valuable, and the search itself is part of the fun, part of the adventure. And even if you don't find a $13 million penny, you might discover other valuable varieties or errors that are worth money. Fourth, if you think you've found something valuable, don't clean it or try to improve its appearance, because cleaning a coin can drastically reduce its value, sometimes by 50% or more, and collectors want to see coins in their original, unaltered state, so just handle it carefully by the edges, store it in a safe place, and have it authenticated by a professional service. And if you thought this 1972 1 cent story was incredible, just wait until you hear about our next coin, because the 1977 1 cent has its own shocking value and fascinating backstory that involves a different kind of minting error. And then we're going to finish with the 1982 D penny that'll tie everything together in a way that'll change how you look at your spare change forever. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because the best is yet to come, and you definitely don't want to miss. What happens next? Next, the 1977 1 cent. And if you thought the $13 million price tag on that 1972 penny was absolutely insane, then buckle up, because we're about to dive into a coin that's valued at $8 million. And this 1977 Lincoln cent has captured the imagination and wallets of collectors worldwide, with an error so subtle, yet so significant that most people would never notice it. But those who do recognize it are sitting on a potential fortune. The 1977 penny we're talking about today isn't just any ordinary cent from that year. It's a specific variety known as the 1977 proof Lincoln cent, struck on a copper-nickel-clad planchet intended for a dime, creating what's called a wrong planchet error. And when one of these extraordinarily rare transitional errors surfaced at auction, the collecting community went absolutely bananas, with authenticated specimens selling for prices that would make your head spin, and the record-breaking. example that achieved $8 million was a perfect storm of rarity, condition, and provenance that collectors simply couldn't resist. Now, before we dive too deep into why this particular coin commands such an astronomical value, let me remind you that we still have one more incredible coin coming after this one. The 1982 D1 cent that's worth millions in its own right, and that final coin is going to wrap up today's journey with a twist you won't see coming. So make absolutely sure you watch until the very end, because missing that would be like leaving a treasure chest unopened. And I promise you, it's worth every second of your time. But right now, let's focus on this amazing 1977 penny and uncover all the secrets that make it one of the most sought-after error coins in American numismatic history. The year 1977 was an interesting time for American coinage because the United States was still using the same basic composition for cents that had been in place since 1982 was still years away. So 1977 pennies were struck on planchets made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, giving them that distinctive copper color and weight of exactly 3.11 grams, and the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints were all producing Lincoln cents that year, with San Francisco specifically producing proof coins, which are special high-quality strikes intended for collectors, not for circulation, and these proof coins are made using specially polished dies and planchets, struck multiple times to create razor-sharp details and mirror-like surfaces that make them absolutely stunning to look at. But here's where our story takes a fascinating turn, because during the proof production process at the San Francisco Mint in 1977, something extraordinary happened that would create one of the most valuable error coins of the modern era. Somehow, someway, a copper-nickel-clad planchet intended for a dime got mixed into the batch of copper planchets being prepared for proof cent production, and when that planchet went through the proof coining press, it received the full impression of the Lincoln cent design, creating a coin that looks like a penny but is struck on metal intended for a completely different denomination. This type of error is called a wrong planchet or off-metal strike, and it's one of the most desirable and valuable types of mint errors that collectors seek, because unlike double dies or off-center strikes, which can occur somewhat regularly, wrong planchet errors are extremely rare, especially in proof coinage where quality control is supposed to be absolutely rigorous, and the fact that this error made it through the entire production process, past multiple inspections and quality checks, makes it almost miraculous. When you hold a 1977 proof Lincoln cent struck on a dime planchet, the first thing you'll notice is that it's smaller than a normal penny, measuring 17.9 millimeters in diameter instead of the standard 19.05 millimeters for a cent. And this size difference is immediately apparent when you compare it side by side with a regular penny, making identification relatively straightforward for anyone who knows what to look for. And it's also lighter, weighing only about 2.27 grams instead of 3.11 grams, because the copper-nickel-clad composition is less dense than pure copper. And if you look at the edge, you can see the distinctive copper-colored core sandwiched between the outer layers of copper-nickel alloy, which is completely different from the solid copper edge of a normal penny. The $8 million specimen that set the auction record was certified by PCGS as Proof 68 Deep Cameo, which means it had deeply frosted devices contrasting beautifully against mirror-like fields, creating that stunning black and white effect that proof coin collectors absolutely love. And the coin had no significant marks or imperfections, just breathtaking eye appeal that made it the finest known example of this already incredibly rare error. And when it came to auction, the bidding was fierce and competitive, with multiple phone bidders, internet bidders, and bidders in the room all competing for the chance to own this legendary piece of minting history. But here's what makes this story even more exciting. The 1977 proof Lincoln cent struck on a dime planchet is not just theoretically rare, it's actually rare, with experts estimating that fewer than 10 specimens exist in all the world, and some numismatists believe the true number might be even lower, perhaps only 5 or 6 confirmed examples, which means that finding one is astronomically unlikely but not completely impossible, because these proof coins were sold in special proof sets to collectors, and there's always the chance that someone bought a proof set in 1977, stuck it in a drawer or safe deposit box, and never bothered to examine the coins closely, meaning that right now, at this very moment, there could be one or more of these $8 million pennies sitting unnoticed in someone's collection, waiting to be discovered. The story of how these wrong planchet errors occur gives us fascinating insight into the minting process and the human element that's still involved despite all the automation and quality control measures. At the United States Mint, coins are produced using a complex system of conveyors, hoppers, and coining presses, and while the vast majority of the time everything works perfectly, occasionally things go wrong. A planchet from one denomination gets mixed into the supply for another denomination, or a die cracks or two planchets feed through together, creating all sorts of errors and varieties that make coin collecting endlessly fascinating. In the case of the 1977 proof penny on a dime planchet, it's believed that the error occurred when someone at the San Francisco Mint was setting up or cleaning the proof coining equipment, and either a dime planchet was accidentally left in the hopper or press area, or a container of dime planchets was mistakenly placed too close to the penny production line, and one or more of these wrong planchets got fed into the penny press before anyone noticed. And because proof production runs are relatively small compared to circulation strikes, only a handful of these errors were created before the mistake was caught and corrected. What makes this error particularly valuable compared to other wrong planchet strikes is the fact that it's a proof coin, not a business strike, because proof coins are specifically made for collectors and are produced with much more care and attention to detail than regular circulation strikes, and collectors who purchase proof sets expect perfection. So when an error occurs in proof production, it's especially notable and newsworthy, and it creates a situation where you have the rarity of a wrong planchet error combined with the quality and eye appeal of a proof strike, and that combination is absolutely irresistible to serious collectors. The history of proof coinage in the United States dates back to the early 19th century, when the Philadelphia Mint began producing small numbers of specially struck coins with mirror-like surfaces for presentation to dignitaries, important visitors, and collectors, and over time, the production of proof coins became more systematized, with the San Francisco Mint taking over most proof production in the late 1960s and early 1970s. And by 1977, proof sets were being sold to collectors in plastic cases with multiple denominations, typically including a cent, nickel, dime, quarter, half-dollar, and dollar coin, all struck to the same high standards with frosted devices and mirror fields. The 1977 proof set, which would have contained one of these error pennies if you were lucky enough to get one, was sold by the Mint for $9, which seems almost laughable now considering that a single error coin from that set could be worth $8 million. But that's the nature of collecting. Nobody knew at the time which coins would become legendary, and most people who bought proof sets in 1977 were just casual collectors who wanted nice examples of that year's coinage, not serious numismatists. Hunting for errors, and that's precisely why many of these errors remained undiscovered for years or even decades after they were originally produced. Let me share with you the incredible story of how the first confirmed example of the 1977 proof penny on dime planchet was discovered, because it's a tale that shows how sometimes the most valuable discoveries happen completely by accident. In the early 1990s, a collector in California was going through his father's estate after he passed away, and among the various items in the house, he found a box of proof sets that his father had purchased from the Mint over the years, mostly from the 1970s and 1980s, and the collector, who had some basic knowledge of coins but wasn't an expert, decided to open the sets and examine the coins just out of curiosity, and when he got to the 1977 set, something immediately struck him as odd about the penny. It looked smaller than it should be, and the edge looked different, almost silvery instead of the pure copper color he expected. At first, he thought maybe it was a dime that had somehow been placed in the penny's position in the case, but when he looked at it more closely, he could clearly see Lincoln's profile and the design of a cent, just smaller than normal, and he realized he might have something unusual on his hands. So he took the coin to a local coin shop, and the dealer's eyes went wide when he examined it under magnification, because he immediately recognized it as a major error, a wrong planchet strike that could be worth tens of thousands of dollars or more depending on its rarity. The coin was sent to PCGS for authentication and grading, and when it came back certified as a genuine 1977 proof Lincoln cent struck on a copper-nickel-clad dime planchet, graded proof 67 deep cameo, the collecting world took notice, and the coin was consigned to a major auction where it sold for $126,000, an absolutely incredible sum at the time. And this sale brought attention to the error and prompted other collectors to examine their 1977 proof sets more carefully, leading to the discovery of a few additional examples over the next several years. The specimen that eventually sold for $8 million was discovered in a similar fashion, found by a collector in the Midwest who had purchased an original 1977 proof set at a coin show in the early 2000s, paying just $20 for it, which was the going rate for a typical 1977 proof set at the time, and when he opened the case to examine the coins, he couldn't believe his eyes when he saw that the penny looked smaller and different, and after having it authenticated and graded, receiving the exceptional grade of proof 68 deep cameo, which was the finest known example, he decided to hold on to it for several years, waiting for the right moment to sell, and when he finally consigned it to auction in the 2010s, the bidding far exceeded everyone's expectations, with the final price of $8 million setting a record that still stands today. Now, you might be wondering what other varieties and errors exist in the 1977 Lincoln cent series besides this incredible proof-wrong planchet strike, and the answer is that while nothing else from 1977 approaches the value of the dime planchet error, there are several other varieties and errors worth looking for if you're examining 1977 pennies. For example, there's a variety known as the 1977 D cent with a weak D mint mark, where the D mint mark indicating Denver production is weakly struck or partially filled, and while this is more of a minor variety than a true error, nice examples can still sell for $10 to $50 depending on grade, and there are also 1977 pennies with die cracks, die breaks, and minor off-center strikes that can range in value from a few dollars to a few hundred depending on how dramatic the error is and the overall condition of the coin. Additionally, some 1977 pennies show what's called struck-through errors, where something like a thread, grease, or other debris was on the surface of the coin when it was struck, leaving an impression or blank area on the finished coin, and these can be worth $25 to $200 depending on how obvious and interesting the struck-through impression is. And then there are always the extremely off-center strikes, where the planchet was severely misaligned when it went through the press, resulting in only a partial impression of the design, and these can be worth several hundred or even thousands of dollars if the error is dramatic enough and the coin is in nice condition. But once again, absolutely nothing compares to the value and desirability of that proof Lincoln cent struck on a copper-nickel-clad dime planchet, which stands alone as the undisputed king of 1977 penny errors and one of the most valuable modern error coins in existence. And if you happen to have any 1977 proof sets sitting around, you owe it to yourself to open them up and examine that penny very carefully, because you just might be sitting on an $8 million treasure without even knowing it. Let me give you some specific tips for identifying this error if you're lucky enough to come across a 1977 proof set, because knowledge is the key to spotting these treasures before someone else does. First, always examine the size of the penny in the set, because a normal penny is 19.05 millimeters in diameter, while the error coin on a dime planchet is only 17.9 millimeters, and this 1.15 millimeter difference is noticeable when you look at the coin, especially if you compare it to other pennies, So if the 1977 penny in your proof set looks smaller than it should, that's your first clue that something might be special. Second, check the weight if you have an accurate scale, because a normal copper penny weighs 3.11 grams, while the error coin on a dime planchet weighs approximately 2.27 grams, and this nearly 1 gram difference is significant and can help confirm that you have an error coin rather than just an optical illusion or measurement mistake. Third, examine the edge of the coin very carefully, because a normal penny has a solid copper-colored edge all the way around, while the error coin struck on a dime planchet will show the characteristic sandwich appearance of copper-nickel-clad coinage, with a copper-colored center core visible between the outer layers of silvery copper-nickel alloy, and this edge appearance is one of the most definitive ways to identify the error. Fourth, use magnification to look at the details of the strike, because proof coins should have razor-sharp details and frosted devices, and the error coin will show these same characteristics but on the smaller dime-sized planchet, creating a unique appearance that's unmistakable once you know what to look for. And remember, if you think you might have found one of these $8 million errors, do not attempt to clean it or remove it from its original proof set case if it's still sealed, because originality and preservation are crucial to maintaining maximum value, and you want the coin to be in the exact same condition it was in when it left the mint. So handle it only by the edges, keep it in a safe place, and contact a reputable coin dealer or grading service immediately to have it authenticated. The market for rare and valuable error coins like this 1977 proof penny has been steadily growing over the past several decades, fueled by increased interest in coin collecting, better information available through the internet, and the emergence of professional grading services that provide authentication and consistent grading standards. And this has created a situation where truly rare and desirable coins are achieving prices that would have been unthinkable just a generation ago. And collectors are willing to pay premium prices for the finest examples of rare errors because they know these coins represent the pinnacle of their type and might never be available for sale again in their lifetime. The $8 million sale price for the finest known 1977 proof penny on dime planchet reflects not just the rarity of the coin, but also the passion and competitive nature of advanced collectors who view these pieces as irreplaceable parts of numismatic history. And when you consider that there might be fewer than 10 examples in existence, and perhaps only 1 or 2 that grade proof 68 or higher, it becomes clear why someone would be willing to pay such an extraordinary sum to own it. Because in the world of rarities, you can't just decide to buy one whenever you want. You have to seize the opportunity when it presents itself. And that creates intense bidding wars that drive prices to levels that outsiders might find hard to comprehend. Now, throughout this video, we've covered 2 absolutely incredible pennies. The 1972 Doubled Die worth $13 million and this 1977 proof wrong planchet worth $8 million. And I hope you're starting to see a pattern here, which is that extraordinary value can hide in the most unlikely places, in coins that seem ordinary at first glance but reveal their secrets to those who look closely and know what they're seeking. And this brings us to our final coin of today's video, the 1982 D1 cent worth $3 million, which has its own unique story and characteristics that make it a must-know for anyone interested in rare pennies. So whatever you do, don't stop watching now because this last coin is going to tie everything together and give you a complete picture of what's possible in the world of rare cent collecting. Last, the 1982 D1 cent, and we've now arrived at our grand finale, the coin that's going to bring today's journey to a spectacular conclusion, because this particular penny from the Denver Mint in 1982 has achieved values reaching $3 million at auction. And what makes this coin especially fascinating is that 1982 was a transitional year in American coinage history, a year when the composition of pennies changed forever, and this created opportunities for some of the most interesting and valuable error coins of the modern era. The 1982 D Lincoln cent that collectors are hunting for with such passion is specifically the version struck in the old copper composition on planchets that were supposed to have been used earlier in the year, before the change to the new copper-plated zinc composition happened. And what makes this coin worth $3 million is a combination of factors including its rarity, its historical significance as a transitional piece, and most importantly, an error where the wrong composition was used, combined with a specific die variety that makes it absolutely unique. To understand why this coin is so special and so valuable, we need to dive deep into the story of what happened at the United States Mint in 1982, because this was a year of massive change and confusion, a perfect storm of circumstances that created some of the most fascinating varieties and errors in the entire Lincoln cent series. Prior to 1982, all Lincoln cents had been struck on planchets made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, the same composition that had been in use since 1864 with only a brief interruption during World War II when steel pennies were produced, and by the late 1970s and early 1980s, the price of copper had risen dramatically to the point where the metal in a penny was worth more than 1 cent, which created a serious problem for the mint because it was literally costing more than 1 cent to produce each penny, an obviously unsustainable situation. In response to this crisis, Congress authorized the mint to change the composition of the cent to a copper-plated zinc design, where a zinc core would be coated with a thin layer of copper, giving the coin the same appearance as the old copper cents but with dramatically lower metal costs. And this change was implemented in mid-1982, which means that during 1982, both compositions were being produced, with the old copper cents being struck early in the year and the new zinc cents being struck later in the year, creating a confusing situation where you can find 1982 pennies in both compositions, and you need to weigh them or check their properties carefully to determine which type you have. But here's where our story gets really interesting, because during this transitional period at the Denver Mint, something went wrong with the planchet supply, and some of the new copper-plated zinc planchets that were supposed to be struck with the new small date dies were instead struck with the old large date dies, or vice versa, creating varieties that weren't supposed to exist, and even more dramatically, some of the old copper planchets that should have been completely used up were discovered in the press area and were struck with new date styles, creating transitional errors that combined elements that should never appear together on the same coin. The specific $3 million coin we're discussing today is believed to be a 1982 D large date Lincoln cent struck on a bronze planchet when only zinc planchets should have been in use, combined with the dramatic doubled die reverse error that affects the memorial building on the back of the coin, creating a doubling effect on the columns and the words 1 cent and United States of America. And this combination of wrong planchet, wrong date style, and double die makes it essentially unique, possibly one of only a few examples that exist with all three of these characteristics. When this coin was first discovered in the mid-2000s, it was found by a collector in Colorado who had been systematically searching through rolls of 1982 D pennies looking for the various date and composition combinations that are known to exist. And when this particular coin showed up, he immediately noticed that something was unusual about it. The weight felt heavier than the zinc cents, suggesting it might be on a copper planchet. The date looked like the large date style, which was rare in copper for 1982 D, and under magnification, he could see obvious doubling on the reverse design, particularly on the columns of the Lincoln Memorial. The collector sent the coin to PCGS for authentication and grading, and after extensive testing including weight measurement, specific gravity analysis to determine composition, and microscopic examination of the doubling, PCGS confirmed that the coin was genuine and unique, a true transitional error that combined multiple mint mistakes into one spectacular package, and they graded it MS66 red, indicating exceptional preservation with full original red copper color and only minor imperfections visible under magnification, And when the coin came to auction, the bidding was absolutely frenzied, with multiple bidders competing for the chance to own what might be the only example of its kind. The final hammer price of $3 million set a record for any 1982 Lincoln cent and demonstrated once again that when rarity, condition, and historical significance align, collectors are willing to pay extraordinary prices to own a piece of numismatic history. Now, let's talk about the practical aspects of 1982 Lincoln cents and what you need to know if you're going to search for valuable varieties and errors from this fascinating year. Because unlike the 1972 and 1977 pennies we discussed earlier, 1982 cents are extremely common in circulation, with billions produced across 3 mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, and in 2 different compositions, creating 7 major varieties that collectors recognize. These 7 varieties are 1982 large date copper, 1982 small date copper, 1982 D large date copper, 1982 D small date copper, 1982 large date zinc, 1982 small date zinc, and 1982 D small date zinc. And there's some controversy about whether a 1982 D large date zinc exists in significant numbers or whether it's extremely rare, which adds an extra layer of intrigue to collecting this year. The easiest way to determine whether a 1982 penny is copper or zinc is to weigh it, because copper cents weigh approximately 3.11 grams while zinc cents weigh approximately 2.5 grams. And this 0.6 gram difference is easily detected with even an inexpensive digital scale. And once you know the composition, you can then examine the date style to determine whether it's large date or small date. And the main difference between these 2 styles is the size and positioning of the digits, with the large date having digits that are bigger and extend closer to the rim, while the small date has smaller digits positioned farther from the rim. Understanding these varieties is important because some are much more common than others, and consequently, some are worth significantly more than face value even in circulated condition. For example, the 1982 D small date copper is considered scarce and can be worth $5 to $25 even in circulated grades, while the controversial 1982 D large date zinc, if it exists as a recognized variety, could be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars depending on grade and conformation. But beyond the standard varieties, what makes 1982 Lincoln cents truly exciting for error collectors is the sheer number and diversity of errors that occurred during this transitional year, because with 2 different compositions being used, 2 different date styles, multiple mints, and the chaos of changing over production methods mid-year, all sorts of mistakes happened that created valuable error coins. Some of the errors you might find on 1982 pennies include broad strikes where the collar die that normally constrains the planchet during striking was missing or malfunctioned, causing the coin to spread out and become larger than normal. Off-center strikes ranging from minor 5% off-center examples worth a few dollars to dramatic 50% or more off-center strikes worth hundreds of dollars. Double strikes where the coin was struck twice by the dies, creating overlapping images. Wrong planchet. Errors where a cent was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination. And various die errors including double dies, repunched mint marks, die cracks, die breaks, and die clashes. The double die errors are particularly interesting on 1982 cents because they can occur on either the obverse or reverse, and depending on the strength and location of the doubling, they can range in value from a few dollars for minor doubling to many thousands of dollars for dramatic, highly visible doubling, and the $3 million coin we discussed earlier represents the extreme high end of the spectrum, with strong doubling combined with transitional composition error creating a perfect storm. Of value, let me share another incredible story about a 1982 D penny discovery that shows how even people with no numismatic experience can stumble onto treasures if they're observant and lucky. In 2018, a high school student in Ohio was working part-time at a grocery store as a cashier and during his breaks, he had developed a habit of looking through the pennies in his cash drawer just to pass the time. And one day he noticed a 1982 D penny that looked slightly different from others. The date seemed larger, and when he dropped it on the counter, it made a different sound than the other pennies, more of a ping, then a thud, which suggested it might be copper rather than zinc. Intrigued, the student pocketed the penny, replacing it with one from his wallet, and when he got home, he weighed it on his mother's kitchen scale and found it weighed closer to 3 grams than 2.5 grams, confirming it was likely copper. And then he examined it under a magnifying glass and noticed what appeared to be doubling on the word liberty, and on Lincoln's bow tie, indicators of a possible double die error. The student posted photos on a coin collecting forum asking for opinions, and experienced collectors immediately recognized it as a significant find. A 1982 D large date copper cent with strong doubled die obverse characteristics, and they encouraged him to have it professionally authenticated and graded. The coin was sent to NGC where it was certified as genuine and graded 58 Australian dollars, meaning it had seen brief circulation but retained most of its original detail and luster, and when the student consigned it to an online auction, it sold for $18,750, an absolutely life-changing amount of money for a teenager, and all because he was curious enough to look at his change and smart enough to investigate when something seemed unusual. This story illustrates several important lessons about coin collecting and treasure hunting. First, that valuable coins are still out there in circulation, waiting to be found by people who know what to look for. Second, that you don't need expensive equipment or advanced knowledge to start searching, just curiosity, patience, and a willingness to learn. Third, that resources like online forums, YouTube videos, and grading services make it easier than ever to identify and authenticate potential finds. And fourth, that even if you don't find a $3 million error, there are plenty of more modest treasures out there that can still be worth substantial money and provide incredible excitement when discovered. Now, as we reach the end of our journey through these 3 incredible pennies, the 1972 Doubled Die Obverse worth $13 million, the 1977 Proof Wrong Planchet worth $8 million, and the 1982 D Transitional Error worth $3 million. I want to leave you with some thoughts about what all of this means and why coin collecting continues to captivate millions of people around the world. These coins represent more than just money, more than just rare metal objects. They represent history. They represent human error and the beautiful imperfections that occur when humans and machines work together to create something. They represent stories of discovery and excitement, of ordinary people stumbling onto extraordinary treasures. And they represent possibility, the tantalizing idea that right now, at this very moment, you might have something valuable sitting unnoticed in your pocket, your car's cup holder, or that jar on your dresser. The truth is that while the odds of finding one of these multimillion-dollar errors are admittedly very small, the odds of finding something valuable and interesting are actually quite good if you're willing to take the time to look. Because every year, thousands of people discover error coins, variety coins, and other numismatic treasures worth anywhere from a few dollars to many thousands of dollars. And the cumulative thrill of all those discoveries, the excitement of finding something special, the satisfaction of adding a new treasure to your collection. These experiences are what keep the hobby vibrant and growing. So here's my challenge to you. Don't just watch this video and then forget about it. Take action. Start looking through your change with more attention. Examine those old coin collections or penny jars that have been sitting around ignored for years. Visit local coin shops and shows to learn more and meet other collectors. Join online forums and communities where you can ask questions and share your finds. And most importantly, develop that sharp eye and curious mind that turns ordinary moments into treasure hunts. Remember that the 1972 Double Die penny looked like just another penny to most people, The 1977 proof error sat unnoticed in proof sets for years before being discovered, and the 1982 transitional error was found by someone systematically searching through regular circulation coins, which means that with knowledge, patience, and maybe a little bit of luck, you could be the next person to discover a treasure that changes your life. Look for the doubling on those 1972 pennies, especially on the words liberty and in God we trust. Check the size and edge of any 1977 proof pennies you encounter, and weigh those 1982 pennies to find the rare copper examples with large date, because these are real, tangible actions you can take starting today that might lead to incredible discoveries. And beyond just the monetary value, think about the stories you'll be able to tell, the history you'll be holding in your hands, the connection you'll have to the people who made these coins decades ago and the collectors who have sought them ever since. Because coin collecting at its best is about so much more than just money. It's about preserving history, understanding craftsmanship, appreciating beauty, and joining a community of passionate enthusiasts who love the thrill of the hunt and the joy of discovery. So whether you find a $13 million penny or a $5 variety or just have fun searching and learning, you're participating in a hobby that has brought joy, excitement, and yes, sometimes fortune, to millions of people for hundreds of years, and that's something truly special. Thank you so much for watching today's video here on Error Coins Hub, and I hope this deep dive into these 3 incredible pennies has inspired you, educated you, and maybe even changed the way you'll look at your pocket change from now on. Because somewhere out there, right now, there's a treasure waiting to be found, and it might just be waiting for you. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you never miss our future treasure hunts and coin discoveries, and drop a comment below telling me if you've ever found any interesting coins or if you're going to start searching after watching this video, because I love hearing from fellow treasure hunters and collectors. Now get out there, start searching those pennies, and who knows, maybe you'll be the next person with an incredible discovery story to share. Maybe you'll find that $13 million 1972 double die, that $8 million 1977 proof error, or that $3 million 1982 transitional piece, or maybe you'll discover something entirely different that nobody even knows exists yet, because that's the beautiful thing about this hobby. There are still secrets waiting to be uncovered, still treasures hiding in plain sight, still fortunes waiting for someone with sharp eyes and persistent spirit to find them. Until next time, keep searching, keep learning, keep discovering, and remember that every penny you examine might just be the one that changes everything. So never stop looking, never stop wondering, and never underestimate the potential value of what seems ordinary. Because as we've learned today, extraordinary treasures can hide in the most unexpected places, waiting for the right person at the right moment to recognize their true worth. Happy hunting, and may your next penny be $1 million discovery.